There you go.
Okay. Cool.
The other thing is, I don't know what the noise is like here. It's
it's okay.
So if that's a problem, let me know.
No, it's all good, man. Let's just go for it.
All right.
And Milligan. I'm gonna just send this to Milligan as well. Do you know Andrew?
Who? Andrew?
Andrew Milligan.
No, I don't. The name is familiar. It's probably one of those names I've seen in your group. But I don't. I think the only guys I know are there's a Luke. Who else is there? I can't think. You're the lad that interviewed Ben. What's his name? Something Morgan. Matthew Morgan. That's right.
Oh, Matthew Morgan. Yeah, great young fella. He's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, there's Kev. Hey, Nick. Hey, Kev. Let's see, there might be a couple more. There's John Conroy. So I'd say we'll get going in about sort of 60, 90 seconds.
Sound?
In fact, yeah, let's just get rolling. People can join in later if they want to. So, cool. Keith, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Okay, where to start? So, being a web designer, I think, in some shape or form. This is probably around 2005. The early noughties is when I kind of started learning HTML, CSS, just start playing around with it. I've been into tech and computers since I was about 1984, 1985. And my dad brought me home an Amstrad for Christmas, and I got hooked in. So I've been doing some sort of coding or messing around with computers pretty much all my life since I was a young fella. So when I started to get into web design, I was employed as just do kind of systems and networks. So I wasn't doing web design or coding as my main job. So I was a system admin back when I started. Then I went on to become an IT manager, and I was the IT manager when I decided to leave what I'm currently doing. I was the IT manager for a place in Dublin called Windmill Lane. It's kind of anyone who's into music might have heard of it.
I've heard of it, yeah.
Yeah, it's where U2 recorded all their albums. So I was the IT manager for there up to about, when did I leave? I think it was 2012, 2011. And I left because I was just really, there was a lot of stuff going on with, I suppose, Ireland at the time, with the country, and specifically what I mean by the country, I mean, if you remember what Ireland was like back then, it just came out of the financial crash, and my wages were going down, my taxes were going up, my mortgage was going up, and overall I just felt really squeezed. So I remember thinking to myself, the only way I can ever kind of take power in my life is to do something for myself in some shape or fashion. So that's what kind of led me to becoming a web designer, because it was the only thing I could do that I could kind of go out on my own, strike out on my own, and it was the only thing that was, I thought I could do anyway, and start charging people money for it. So that's how it really started. It was around 2012, and when I first went out by myself, I knew nothing about marketing. I really was completely hopeless. I was all over the place. My first year was a complete and utter disaster. I mean, it went so badly that I couldn't pay my mortgage for about 6 months. So that's kind of
what did you think was going to bring you clients when you started?
I genuinely thought, look, because even then I was able to kind of put together a decent website. Like, I kind of knew enough that I thought people would come to me, and people would see my value and they'd be like, okay, we have to hire this guy because he's so good. And that was my kind of naive worldview at the time, was that like people will see you and they'll come to you if you're good enough. And of course, the real world doesn't work that way. So I found out this pretty quickly after I gave my boss a month's notice and I left. And I remember I spent the first 2 months actually working on my portfolio site, which is completely nuts. Okay. Like, I mean, like, and I remember spent so long kind of doing this ornate graphic of the Dublin skyline. And I thought, yeah, this is going to really show people how great I am, and people will see this and they'll be wowed. And, you know, like I can't help but not get clients because of this stuff. Of course, that didn't actually transpire in the end. So needless to say, the first year in business, if you like, was a complete disaster. The clients that I did manage to get were the worst kind of clients that you could imagine, you know, people who were slow to pay. You know, these are people who, you know, trying to charge decent money for clients like that is impossible. They're all far more demanding than, you know, top drawer clients might be. So yeah, my first year was a complete disaster, and it only kind of changed really when I don't know how familiar anyone in the group is of a guy called John McCulloch. Has anyone heard of him?
Heard the name, but I don't know much about him. So give us a little bit of background.
So John McCulloch, he's an English guy. He lives down in Cork, and he calls himself the evil bald genius. And yeah, so this guy, I stumbled across a Facebook ad of his sometime in 2012, and I can't remember exactly what the ad said, but it really spoke to me because he spoke from the heart. I generally like people who are politically incorrect and who aren't afraid to ruffle a few feathers in their message. And he was 100% like that. I can't remember exactly what he said, but he said something that really spoke to me. And it, you know, grabbed me, it hit me in the gut, and I'm like, okay, I have to check this guy out. So I clicked on his ads, and from there opted into his list and joined his membership site. And from there, like, I started to learn direct response marketing, copywriting, and understand that the only way you're going to get the way to kind of operate, the way your marketing should work, it should always be people coming to you rather than the other way around. If you're going out looking for clients, actively looking for clients, if you're chasing people, and this goes for any kind of realm of life, if you're chasing people rather than people coming to you, then the dynamic is going to be, you know, messed up from the start. So that's what I had been doing, like my whole entire marketing efforts. I mean, I look back now and I absolutely cringe as to what I was doing. I was going to the likes of BNI. I don't know if you know what BNI is.
I do, yeah.
Yeah, it's
business breakfast.
Yeah, that's
it's cringe. I've been to it. It's awful. You get stuck in there. You're like, what do I do? Get me out of this horrible room.
Like, I genuinely felt like I was in some sort of cult meeting because you're being indoctrinated the way they bring you in from the start. And I remember sitting there one morning, I went to it, and it was a couple of hours long, and everyone gets up, and the way they kind of move, it's kind of like, it's really creepy, you know. So you get one guy who's an accountant stands up and he's going, hey, yeah, I brought, you know, two bits of business for Maria over there, and I got Paddy another bit of business, and, you know, I'm like deadly sure, like, you know. And then, you know, Maria stands up and she says what she's been doing for the last week, and it's just, the way they kind of spoke, you know, they just had this glassy look in their eyes, you know, which was like, there's something off about these guys, you know. So my marketing efforts, when I first went out myself, like I did BNI. I went to all sorts of, you know, networking meetings. So you go, and there's a bunch of people in a room, you know, they used to be on in town in Dublin, you know, there'd be meetup.com meetups. So I'd go to these, and I'd hand out my business card to, you know, a lot of other designers or a lot of other people who had no interest in ever hiring me, you know. So, so I was doing that, and I tried cold calling and doorstepping as well. And one time I did doorstepping, I almost got arrested, and the guards were almost called. So another fella, like, I did cold calling, and he threatened to come find me and burn down my house. So this was one guy, I don't know who it was. It was a business owner. I rang him, and it was another one, and I somehow ended up having a conversation. I'll never forget it. I ended up having a conversation for about half an hour, and he was just like, you know, who are you? What are you talking about? Why do you think I need a website? Can you fucking tell me, like, how did you? And he just kept ranting at me for about half an hour, and I was so desperate for work that I kept, instead of just saying this is a waste of time, I kept trying to argue with him, reason with him. It was just nuts, and I was really clueless, and I was getting into a lot of debt, and I was really, really failing until I came across this the evil bald genius, and he was kind of the savior. So yeah, from under his kind of tutelage, I guess, I started to learn about people like Dan Kennedy, John Carlton, all these great copywriters, everyone from the more up-to-date contemporary guys like Dan Kennedy, to the old school guys like Claude Hopkins, Robert Collier. And I just kind of lapped it up. I really devoured it I became hooked on copywriting and just getting my marketing right. So
tell me about the first campaign you did where it actually clicked and stuff just started to work.
Here's what happened. So I went. So 2012, late 2012, I started learning about all this stuff. So I went to America for a few months, and that's a story in itself. I won't bore anyone what happened there, but let's just say I spent the guts of 2013 just devouring all this stuff up, lapping it up. I got a job. Actually, the whole entire American story is. Let's just say I went there. I was working for some guy, and I came back to Ireland. Came back for the All Ireland finals late summer 2013 to watch the Dubs play Mayo. And over that kind of length of time, I was kind of all I could do was think about, okay, how am I going to put all this stuff into practice? How am I going to put make something actual real happen for it? So what I did was I decided to get a list of all the. First thing I did was I wrote a report. So I wrote a report that people will get once they opted into my list. And the report was basically explaining how web designers as a whole, it was basically an accusatory shot at the industry of web designers. Basically saying that they don't really understand that your website is there to get you leads, get you customers, essentially make you money. It's not just something that needs to sit there and not do anything, which is what a designer typically would do. They'd make a website for a client, and a lot of the time they don't really do anything. They don't really have a purpose other than just to kind of just fill it with useless information, a few photos and bits and pieces like that. So my approach was, after thinking about it for a long time, was to say, okay, well, that kind of notion, that idea that a website doesn't really do very much is complete insanity. Why isn't it there to get you leads? Why isn't it there to make you sales? Like, surely if you're spending whatever, for example, $2,000 on a website, why isn't that making you money? That was my kind of thinking. So the first report I wrote was just basically explaining this to potential clients, that look, if you're looking to get a website, or if you have one built in the past, and this isn't clearly communicated to you by your web designer, he or she is doing you a major disservice, because if you are spending X amount on it, it should give you multiples of that in return, and you should be able to verify that. You should be able to point to numerous customers that you would have gotten via your website, or else what's the point? So it seemed to me that a lot of businesses would just get a website done as a box ticking exercise, and they wouldn't really kind of put more, much more thought into it than that, and not see it for what it is, which is arguably the most powerful marketing engine you have available to you in the current era. So that's really what my report was all about. It just kind of explained this, and not only that, but it went into detail about my philosophy, how I think, and how my thinking is kind of dictated not necessarily by design, but it's which obviously is important, but by the fact that that's all your different marketing efforts have to produce a return. So yeah, just went into detail about how I think, my philosophy, what your website should do, and why other web designers are crooks, basically. Or not even crooks, but they're kind of misleading you, or they're basically not. They're doing you a big disservice by essentially selling you or creating a website for you that doesn't really do very much, except just kind of sit there and look pretty. So that's really what I did. And then when I went back to Dublin, I painstakingly went. I can't remember what it was, but I got a business directory, and I was able to kind of go through this business directory and see which businesses didn't have a website, or if they did, their website was really bad. And I ran a direct mail campaign targeting these guys. So it was postcards. So I used basically one postcard that they would get, and I tried to target the decision maker, whoever that might have been. So I got sent off the first postcard to the decision maker, and it was like, "Hey," with a headline, "Hey, did you realize that?" Jeez, I can't even remember what I said, but it was something along the lines of, you know, web designers are doing you a big disservice by, you know, building a website that doesn't get you any customers, something to that effect. So I kind of hit them. I kind of explained it to them in terms that they might understand that they should be using, you know, they should be getting a website for as a means to get you customers and clients, etc., and nothing else. It shouldn't just be a box ticking exercise. And yeah, I just directed them on to via this this postcard, direct them to a landing page where they would opt in to get my report, and that was it. Then they would get an autoresponder sequence. And then, yeah, just hit them with daily emails until they finally submitted. So that was really.
And were you closing them on a call, or what were you doing for that campaign?
Well, basically, so yeah, people would opt into my list, and generally that's how I work. Yeah. So, I mean, I didn't get a huge take-up rate, but what I did get was I got enough. I was able to get, you know, I got some bites, right? And I got enough that kind of, and they weren't the best clients in the world, but they weren't the worst either. Like, so they were coming to me pre-sold, rather than me kind of, you know, getting on a cold call, or, you know, me putting on a cheap Dunnes Stores suit and, you know, showing up at their office and almost getting the guards, you know, getting the guards called me. So I wasn't doing that. Like, so I was getting guys who were coming to me, and they were pre-sold on what I was all about to an extent. So that helped in kind of creating, in building my positioning, and building the value proposition before I even had to open my mouth. So, you know, it by no means was a silver bullet, and like I wasn't suddenly landing huge, you know, 6-figure clients or anything like that straight away, but it was a step up, and it gave me ideas, and it gave me a lot to work with and to refine upon and then build upon subsequently. So yeah, in terms of closing them, yeah, typically I would just close. I always like to speak to any new clients on one-on-one on the phone. I think it's a good idea just to show the client who you are, you know, to put a face to the emails, just to give that kind of one-to-one human interaction. I think it's invaluable. So they get to see a bit about what you're like, your philosophy, you know, who you are just generally in the flesh, or, you know, or via some sort of human contact, whether it's, you know, a Zoom call or a Skype call or just a normal phone call. So yeah, typically there would be some back and forth via emails. A lot of people would get offended. There was one guy I turned into a customer who was really, he just kind of sent me this big hate mail, and we managed to have a back and forth, and eventually I closed him as a client, which was quite nice. So it's I think Ben Settle talks about that. Sometimes your biggest haters can turn into your biggest fans after a while. So yeah, that was really it. I just use email to build a list, and I just relentlessly email my list as more or less daily. Till I got clients. Really, that's all I did. I then branched out and started using Google Ads as well. So I started off just using direct mail, which worked okay, I guess, but I got far better results using Google Ads. But the principle remains the same.
When you went to Google Ads, did you use the same principles? I mean, did you take what had worked from your campaign and say, okay, this converted, I'm going to turn it into an ad now? Like, proven on organic, and then
it's no different. I mean, whether you're using offline direct mail, if you're using postcards, you know, the principle is more or less the same. You're catching people's attention using a headline. You're outlining what might be in it for them, using that headline, using as soon as possible, and then you're getting to just essentially raise their hand and say, look, I mean, just to get them to express an interest, and then bring them into your sales funnel and get them to, you know, show them more about what you do. And that's really all it is, whether you're using something as old school as print, postcards, or something more, you know, or modern, up to date kind of marketing means, like Google Ads or Facebook ads or whatever it might be. It's all the same. The principles are the same. They haven't changed since Claude Hopkins and Robert Collier, since they started talking about direct mail, like how many years ago? 120, 130 years ago, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Principles, human nature and human psychology has not changed, no matter which way you might want to dress it up. So yeah, it's pretty much the same thing, I think.
Okay, so at that point, you've discovered direct marketing, you've run your own campaigns, and you're getting traction. So you've proved the concept to yourself. What was your progression from there to getting sort of deeper into the world of direct response and getting hired by people like Ben and Doberman Dan? How did that happen?
Well, that all happened by, Ben, God, actually, how did I start working with Ben? I found out about Ben through John McCulloch. So John still is, I presume, a friend of Ben's, and John would talk about Ben quite regularly in his emails, and I think Ben would do the same. So they were kind of promoting each other on their lists. And that's how I found Ben. John, while he's an amazing all-around marketer, copywriter, I think he's good, very good at email. Ben is untouchable, I think. I don't think there's anyone who's quite as good as him anywhere. And John kind of would acknowledge this as such, and he would say, look, this guy is the best in the world, check him out. So I checked out Ben, and I got onto his list, and I got onto, I became an email player subscriber, and what exactly? Oh yeah. Ben back in those days used to do critiques. So he would do one email critique per month, and I think I just sent him in one of my emails to be critiqued. He said, okay, you need to change this, whatever about it. And we just got talking, and he just basically said, look, I'm looking for a web designer. Can you do the job? Can you do X, Y, Z? And I was there, really. It's poor Ben. At the time, he was at such a low ebb with web designers. I think he'd hired like 2 or 3 guys, and they all had turned out to be complete flakes, or they just didn't do what they were supposed to do. And he really wasn't expecting much, And I don't think what I did for him was anything special. But he was delighted with my work, and I've been working with him ever since. So that's like, years. That's about 7 or 8 years, I think. So it goes back to about 2014. So, in front, like, I did to work with all these guys, I didn't really do very much. All I did was, I suppose, if there's 2 things I did was, I have maybe somewhat. I think I have a unique design style that kind of understands direct marketing and the principles in direct marketing. I think a lot of people seem to like that. So I'm just guessing. So because of that, Ben was very, very, he was quick to recommend me to other guys, and I've since worked with a lot of people in his circle. So I don't think there's been any kind of great marketing efforts on my part to kind of work with the likes of Dom and Dan. It's just that I was able to do a good job for Ben, and he recommended me to other people, and that was really it. So it wasn't down to any kind of marketing efforts on my behalf. Just, I suppose, just being someone who understands direct marketing and who's able to design websites. I don't think it's that common. Maybe not in the way that Ben would like it, I suppose, or other people of that ilk would like it. But I suppose if maybe the fact that I've also branded myself as direct response web designer, and I've done that for many years, and that's something that's kind of resonated with copywriters and marketers. So, but no specific, marketing efforts that are not. It's just been really word of mouth. Just been doing, I suppose, an okay job for Ben, and he's just recommending me to other people. So that's really it.
Yeah, no, this is the thing, isn't it? It comes to a point where everything is just by referral, and people passing you from one to the other. And at that point, the authority positioning is even better than inbound, because you don't even have to say anything. You've already got the gig before you say hello to them.
Yeah, to tell you the truth, I haven't done any marketing in a long time. I don't email my list. My website is down at the moment, and that's because I'm redesigning it. I'm doing a few bits and pieces, but it is actually down. And everyone that comes to me, I don't lack for clients. Everyone that comes to me is recommended by someone that I've worked with, and I haven't for quite some time. Even if it were to happen that all my current clients were to drop dead, then I'd know what to do to kind of start getting them back again.
Okay.
Which will be to just revert back to what I did many years ago, 6, 7, or 8 years ago. I'd probably use Facebook ads this time. In fact, I'm thinking of doing this just really for the hell of it, maybe to productize it as something else I can sell. If you're a newly minted web designer, how do you start? I mean, it seems to be a question that it seems to be something that a lot of them really don't know how to do. In that instance, I would definitely use Facebook, and I would kind of target people who, ticked certain boxes, who were fans of. I mean, I'm only guessing. I'm not great at Facebook ads, but I'd probably do something like target people who maybe were members of certain groups, who were following certain people, who would, express some sort of interest in copy, who were entrepreneurial minded. I don't know, but I'd determine what these criteria are and just kind of target these people and get in front of them and try and figure out what their main issue is when it comes to web design, which I suspect there's 2 things. And number one, it's just flat out not easy for a lot of people to do. And number 2, the page builders that a lot of people use, the likes of ClickFunnels and lead pages, etc. They are severely flawed in a lot of ways. And I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs and marketers out there that would prefer if someone could just take over and just do all that stuff for them, and for them not to have to think about it. So if it did come to the fact that I had literally no clients anymore, that's what I would do. And I would target Facebook heavily and figure out who the sort of guy who would be a good fit for me would be, and go after them, get them into a funnel, explain to them why they should, why it's a good idea for them to be using someone like me, what the benefits are of that, why, you need to be concentrating on marketing and not wasting your time building sales pages using ClickFunnels and all these things, which is completely beneath you, and you should be doing stuff like writing copy and coming up with new products rather than you leave all that stuff to me. So that's kind of broadly what I probably would do,
Okay.
Like I said, I might kind of do something that along those lines in the future, just to, because I really do think it's a problem that a lot of web designers have when they start out for the first time. They're like, how the hell do I get clients? So to have some sort of product that outlines that for them, I think will be good. So yeah, we'll see.
When you come to a new project, John, and it's day 0, do you have like a proven visual framework you follow? I mean, is the basic process templated, or are you starting from first principles every time?
With a new sales page, you mean?
Yeah, new sales page as an example.
Yeah. You know what? This is kind of funny because I'm actually going to be doing something similar to this, what we're discussing now with Ben. He has a new product out called, it's kind of an app-based product where you get access to, you know what it is. It's called Profit Parts, where basically you get access to a bunch of experts on different topics. And I'm going to be explaining this roughly along the same lines. But when, I think we discussed, John, we were going to have this chat maybe a few months ago. And when you first mentioned to me, I was like, damn, I don't actually have a process in my head as to how I do this, but I know what to do. Like I've never really articulated it. And I was kind of thinking to myself, Jesus, I should actually have some sort of formal process as to what I do in terms of building a sales page, how I approach it. So at that point, I did actually start thinking about it. And I was like, if I had to explain it to someone else, how would I do it? Well, typically the first thing I do, the first question is, it depends on the clients. Some clients don't want anything kind of overly designed. Ben is one of these people. If you look at his sales pages, they all look very, very, very simple. There's not that many design elements. His focus is on the copy and copy alone. So there's not much of a process involved in something like that, other just ensuring it's consistent. There's consistency throughout the sales page. So that's really what I'm aiming for there. But if the client is looking for something that's a bit more designed, the very, very first thing I'll do is decide, okay, I'll try to break it up into sections that make sense. So typically you might have a sales page that's like 10 to 12 pages long. I would aim to kind of break it up into probably 12 to 15 different sections. And each section is kind of a main, it's not so much a point, but there's a team maybe discussing it, I think, if that makes sense. So that's really what I do. The very first thing I'll do is break it up into these 12 to 15 sections from, typically like a sales page is around, it's in around 12, 10, 11 pages roughly. So I'll break it up into a number of sections that make sense when each section has there's a theme to it. After that, I would kind of decide, stuff like the body fonts, headline fonts, the sizing, I don't really deviate from too many of these. Like I have maybe for headline fonts, I have like 3 or 4 go-tos and I stick to those. I kind of rotate through them every so often. Some days I might pick Oswald, Montserrat. There's a few there that I stick to. Same with body fonts, Open Sans. And there's a few others. There's Lado, Source Sans Pro. So that's the kind of the next step is decide how the fonts look and the headline fonts. So like I said, I stick to a couple I don't deviate from the script too far there. So I break them into sections and decide what fonts I'm going to use. If there's no branding guidelines, I'll decide on a few different colors which I'm going to use for different design elements in the page. My rule of thumb there is to stick to not go beyond about 3. I think when you start to kind of when the page starts to look too much like a kaleidoscope, it gets, you want to kind of always, for direct response copy, you want to under design and not over design. When you start to over design, then you start to detract from the copy and, it becomes a beautiful mess. You really want to ensure that, okay, you want to add design elements to make sure that it pops and it looks good, but ultimately you're there to sell a product and the copy is going to do that. It's not going to be all these design elements, which I think are great and they make things look far better than you already would, but you're not there to, as a designer, you have to be conscious of the fact that copy is the star of the show and not you. So you can't, you're not there to detract from it. So I think when you have too many colors and too many weird design elements, that's what starts to happen. So yeah, in terms of the process, headlines, how they're going to look, break things up into sections that kind of make logical sense, that might have a theme to each different section or kind of a broader point that's going to be made. Then for each different section, I look at it and say, okay, is there design elements I can add to this? Does it make sense to add one in the first instance, or is it better to leave it alone? Then what else would I do after that? That's kind of really broadly it, is just to break everything up into sections and then kind of take every one and look what would make sense for each individual section. But I think the most important thing that I'm completely and utterly anal about when it comes to my design is consistency. So really, this is one thing I see a lot of sales page designers getting completely wrong, that are paying no attention to whatsoever, right? So everything I try to design has consistent spacing, consistent margins. Everything is in proportion. The headlines are all in proportion with each other. So I pick a H1 headline, H2, H3, H4, H5, and they're all in proportion with each other. So I don't randomly say this would be whatever size it would be. So I go 32, 48. So I might start off with the headlines 48, then I might have the next one is 36. H3 might be 28 or whatever. The same with the spacings. I always stick to the same margin and padding sizes or multiples of them throughout the entire site or throughout the entire page. And this is when, if you were to look at a page and on first glance, you might kind of go, I don't know, there's something about this page that doesn't really look good. I don't know, it doesn't really, you might have kind of an adverse reaction to it and you don't know why. Typically, the reason is because the designer has paid no attention to consistency in terms of padding and layout and spacing. They've just completely ignored that. Now, I don't know if I can share. Can I share my screen?
Yeah, you can.
Let me just dig this out. I'm going to see if I can do this. because I found a page really which really demonstrates this quite well. Here we go. Here we go. Got it. Okay. Sorry about the delay here. Now, I don't want to put this guy on blast because I'm. I think the sales page is quite good.
It's inside the Irish Marketers group. I'm not going to publish this one.
Okay.
Outside the group.
No worries. Hang on. Sorry, I'm just figuring out how to do this. So to share my screen. Okay, cool. Desktop one. Okay. Grounds. It's giving me all sorts of security preferences. I don't know how easy I can. Hang on. Okay. I can't do this. It's telling me that I won't be able to share unless I quit my Zoom. So
no problem.
I'll tell you what you can do, right? If you want to have a look, if anyone wants to look, they can go to the name of the guy is Chris. That's actually a weird URL. It's chrisgettin30dayshred.com. I'll tell you what. I'll send on the link later.
Stick it in the chat.
Yeah. We'll stick it in the chat here. Here you go. Right. There's all. Hang on. I'm going to take.
So I'm going to move on to the next thing I wanted to ask you anyway, Keith, which was, are you starting to see like more of a push towards branded approaches with people inside direct response in a way that there wasn't before?
I think there's more. I don't know if that's necessarily true. It depends. Maybe I think the old school guys will never get branded approaches. So the likes of, I'm not going to name any names, but I think the older school guys just will always be of the opinion that the copy is what's important. And when it comes to kind of more branded approaches, as you put it, I don't think they see the value. They will always be copy first. And if there's any kind of design that happens to complement it, then great. But definitely the younger marketers are of the opposite opinion, and they will always appreciate or look for some sort of design that is, or some sort of sales page that is somewhat design centric or design heavy. I think this is a mistake. I think they just look for those sort of pages probably because of brainwashing, or that's what they feel they need, not because of whether it's going to be more effective as a sales page or it's going to sell them more of whatever they're trying to sell. So I think there probably is, yeah, but it depends from whom. So definitely the younger marketers, they will almost expect something that is very, very design centric or heavy. A good place to see this in action actually is if you go onto the Warrior Forum and you see any of the sales pages that are on there. Some of them are just ridiculous and they're just way over the top designed. They introduce all sorts of flashy elements just for the sake of it, and you're kind of looking at it going, what are these guys actually selling? The copy is obscured. You have to kind of dig around in the design to see like what they're actually trying to say, and that's completely the wrong approach. Like if you aren't 100% sure as to what's going on with a sales page, what they're selling, what it's all about, the designer has failed. That's not a sales page in my view. It has to be very, very obvious and very clear. Nothing should be, you shouldn't have to kind of squint your eyes. You shouldn't have to kind of figure out what's going on. If that's happening, then the sales page the designer has failed miserably. And I see a lot of that happening, especially with one place, like I said, I've noticed it a lot, is a lot of stuff I see in the Warrior Forum, which I delve into from time to time to look for inspiration. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great sales pages there, but there's some awful ones that are completely over-designed. They're designing for the sake of it, rather than kind of understanding the fundamental principle that you as a designer are there to create something that sells. You're not there to just, you know, it's the equivalent of kind of like, you know, a 70s coke fueled guitar solo that doesn't really add into the song, you know, is the best analogy I could use. You're just kind
Okay.
of, you know, you just play basic rhythm guitar. Don't go off of this kind of Led Zeppelin-esque kind of solo that goes on for 20 minutes. Just, you're there to design, and you're there to remember the fundamental principle that the copy is the starter show, not you. So yeah, to answer your question, I do see something of a trend amongst a lot of marketers to kind of have something that's more design rather than perhaps is necessary, I think. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. And I know you mentioned earlier on about sort of the world of agency design where and I've seen that myself up close because my family are in print, where the agency designers often will
Oh my
just
God.
be designing their client sites almost to pad out their own portfolio so they can show them off later on to sell more websites. But is there any sort of organization within design or groups of people or people that you pay attention to who focus more on conversion driven design or worth looking at?
Could you just repeat that again? Do I know anyone who's focused on conversion?
Like, I know a lot of the people, like in the world of agency design, they're designing for their portfolios and they're designing for awards. But is there any pushback against that? Are there like any sort of big names in the world of design that you could point to who actually say, no, focus on conversion? Or, I mean, the one I can think of is Nick DiSabato. But can you think of anybody else or a movement against that, more conversion driven?
No.
Because the way more design's gone online nowadays.
No, there's two different worlds when it comes to advertising and marketing. There's direct response and there's brand advertising, for want of a better term. And never the twain shall meet. You're not going to get anyone, at least this is my experience. So the folks who espouse brands identity style marketing, you know, they typically, like you said, they tend to be in bigger agencies and they tend to kind of work with corporate clients. They don't, I remember I first had first-hand experience of this when I worked in Windmill Lane. Actually, Windmill Lane, when I was there, had ceased to be a music studio and primarily focused on advertisements. So we would make the post-production for ads you'd see in Irish telly. For at least half the ads that you see in Irish telly was done where I worked. So we dealt with a lot of advertising heads and marketing heads who were in and out of the building, and I would hear firsthand. They didn't care. Never was conversions mentioned once. Never was there like, okay, we're putting this ad out there and we spent, for argument's sake, just say they spent $500,000 on it. Okay, the $500,000 needs to bring in, I don't know, 2 million in revenue. That was never mentioned. Nothing like that was ever considered. So these guys that's not how they think. It's just a fundamental philosophy, and we can debate as to which one is more, you know, effective. I think we all know the answer to that. But these guys have their way of doing things, and like they're not going to change. It's just a corporate mentality. I think that the attitude amongst kind of aficionados of brand advertising is that, you know, direct response marketing is unseemly, that it's kind of a bit sleazy. You know, it's the late night, you know, the late night infomercial style of advertising.
Yes.
So they think they're above that. You know, they're all about kind of doing kind of clever, sleek, seductive, sexy kind of ads, which, you know, like men jumping, you know, secret agents jumping out of helicopters, you know, all the kind of stuff that is designed to create an image rather than speak to your customer or prospect about their problems and put a solution in front of them that solves that problem. It's just two completely different worlds. And, you know, you're not going to get someone who's an aficionado of one to necessarily see the value of other. I just don't think it's going to happen. So I don't know if there's any pushback within the brand identity worlds. You know, that what they're doing is dubious to say the least, you know, in terms of effectiveness.
Okay.
But there's definitely none within the web. A similar thing definitely exists within the web design world. When I first started out, I was a freelancer, very, very briefly, contractor for some of the big web design agencies in Dublin. So I would do bits and pieces with them, for them, here and there. And I remember when I went to America, I came back and I did some work for one of them, and my philosophy had completely changed at this stage. And I was kind of explaining to them, maybe you should have a headline on this page. And they were like, why? Maybe you should have some. I remember, because I was completely evangelized by what I'd been learning, and I was like, we were designing websites, which I remember there was one site I was designing, and it didn't really have any text on the front page. It was all these weird graphics. So someone would arrive onto the website and it'd be like, what the hell is this thing? What are these guys all about? It wasn't obvious. Like, anyone who happened to stumble across this site would be like, I don't know what the hell this is. And they'd probably just click back out. So I kind of mentioned this to them, and I was like, maybe you should kind of have some benefit of the product offers somewhere. I don't know, maybe. And I were like, I remember sitting in a meeting and they're just kind of looking at me going, what? They were dumbfounded that I suggested this. And, I was like, well, what? I don't know what these guys do. Why do we have all these weird flash graphics? And I just don't see the point. And the response to it was that the client is looking to build a certain brand that we have to get across the energy of what's happening. Just this big long-winded spiel. What? So I need to say I didn't last long with these guys, and I think I did maybe another week of work for this particular crew. I think I had same with another one, and that was it. So these guys will never understand the value of direct response marketing. It's, like I said, it's unseemly, it's uncouth. It is effective, but they don't care about that. They're all about image and brand identity and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know.
Yeah,
but
my little bit of experience to working with agencies sort of says the same. I didn't pursue it after one client. I was just like, this is totally pointless. I'll get nowhere here. So I'm glad to know you had the same experience in Dublin as me. Guys, I'm going to open up now. If anybody else has anything they want to ask Keith or chat to him about for the next minutes, let's go for it.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind asking a question there, John, if I could hop in.
Hey, John.
How are you doing, Keith? Always good to see an Irishman getting a bit of sun.
Too much, mate. Too much. I've actually been suffering from I don't know if you've heard of sun allergy. Today's kind of first day I've kind of.
Jesus, I've never heard of anything more Irish in my whole life other than sun allergy or heat rash as well.
I think heat rash is the same thing, but God, I've been suffering from it the last week, and it's torture. You don't want it, but I think it's just the fact of us Irish. We have to, we're not meant to be in the sun.
That's where you come from, a miserable fucking rock in the middle of nowhere. When the genetics are telling you to get away from good weather. Anyway, something I was interested to ask you anyway, Keith, was my wife is a graphic designer, and sort of it would differ in terms of what you're doing in a sense that she doesn't really mess with any of the code element of things, right? So she would design sales page and all that, but just when code gets involved, she'd be working with ClickFunnels, all that kind of stuff. She'd design emails, all that kind of jazz. But anyway, long story short, there doesn't seem to be a huge amount out there in terms of stuff, in terms of getting clients in this kind of line of work or whatever.
Yeah.
And I know you mentioned kind of running Facebook ads and all that kind of thing, but I'll give you a suggestion of what I was thinking might be something to run with, and then I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are on that, or if there's something else you think would work better than in terms of getting clients as a graphic designer or a sales page designer or somebody who designs emails or whatever. So what I was thinking, because this is similar to what I do with copywriting, is that you find these sales pages that aren't particularly great or could be better. You find these emails that maybe the copy is good, but there's not a lot of design here, and they could look a little bit more professional or introduce an element of brand or whatever. And you just kind of design maybe a small section of the sales page, or convert one of their emails into something that looks good, and then send it on to the decision maker via email and a bit of follow-up, just as a way to kind of do a bit of outreach without, putting money into ads and all that kind of thing. So what would you think of that kind of an approach? And is there something you do differently? Is your own little spin that you do on that? Or
there's no easy answer to this. I mean, the stuff you mentioned there, taking something that's already something that already exists and kind of then redoing it yourself and then saying to the clients, hey, I've done that. So I've done pretty much everything. I mean, for me, I think the best approach is always to be in full control, or as much control of the environment as possible. And the only way you'll do that is via sales funnel. So getting people into your universe and talking to them, building that relationship with them on a day-to-day basis, hitting them day in, day out with value, explaining your philosophy, what you're all about, why you differ to anyone else, and just entertaining them. You don't even have to talk about business or web design or anything. I remember when I was doing daily emails, a lot of the time I didn't even talk about web design. I would talk about all sorts of weird stuff like politics, and a lot of the time I would, just talk about how I view the world. So really, with all this was done with the intention of building a relationship with any prospective clients. And then, after a while, they had no option but to submit and surrender and just end up working with me. So I'd still stick to that approach, just to building some sort of funnel, getting people into your universe, into a world where you control the interaction, you control the narrative, rather than kind of, the metas you just outlined, they can work. Anything can work theoretically. I just know what works for me and what has worked for me and what has worked well. And it's
your approach, I guess, kind of, because I know it's been, I think it was like you haven't really done any marketing for like 7 or so years.
Not for a while, yeah.
So I guess like the modern adaptation of that, of like what had worked for you before, would be to, add a lot of people on Facebook and then just be posting content through Facebook that kind of builds that relationship with people.
You mean go down the direction of kind of setting up Facebook groups?
No, not even that. Just like, adding people on Facebook where your profile is kind of set up for business stuff.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Stuff you're posting is kind of like an email, I guess, in that you're just kind of like building that relationship that way, and then maybe introducing an offer here or there, or following up in Messenger.
Well, the thing is, like, the principle is the same, whether you're adding people on Facebook and getting in front of them that way, or, Instagram might be even worth a look. Instagram wasn't around back then, or at least there wasn't really something which many people used back 5-6 years ago. So I could explore that, see how effective it is. But regardless of the medium you're using, it's the meta is the same, whether you're getting in front of them day in, day out via email, or you're using Facebook. It doesn't really matter. Like, your day in, day out, or however often you want to do it, you're in front of people building that relationship. You're demonstrating your philosophy, you're giving them value. You're just maybe something simple as entertaining your prospective clients, the people you're in front of. So that's all it is. You're building that relationship, but the medium isn't necessarily the important thing. You might be able to say some media are better than others. Is Facebook more effective than email? We could have that debate for a long time.
Well, just to I guess see if I can kind of summarize what you're saying. Then your preferred approach then is to kind of put your stuff out there and then have people reach out to you, where they're
absolutely, yeah.
That's kind of the precipice of what you're trying to do. You don't want to reach out to someone and say, hire me. You want to just be like, here's my stuff. And then if you like it, you're reaching out to me, and now I'm
exactly, because if you're in a situation where, like, I think this applies to all areas of life. If whatever you chase will run away. So it's like the analogy of you see a cat and you want to pet it or pick it up or something. You're walking down the street and you go to the cat, it runs away. But if you, like, I know my own cat back in Ireland was the same, right? You sit there and you kind of walk to the cat will run away, right? And if you sit on the couch, you're just sitting there for 10 minutes. What happens? The cat jumps up in your lap and is like, hey, what's going on? So I think that's kind of a good way to look at it. It's like whatever you chase whatever you chase after will instinctively, people don't like, people like to buy, but they don't like to be sold. So if you're chasing after someone, then you're selling them, and you're automatically in a position of weakness. Whereas, like I said, people like to buy. If you're in a situation where they're coming to you and you're positioning yourself as the expert. You've done this over a period of time via whatever means medium you want to choose, whether it's Facebook, email, or whatever. You know, you've done all this, the positioning work over time. Like, you're the expert. You have people coming to you because you've demonstrated that trust, you've built authority, you've given value, and it's a different dynamic rather than you reaching out cold to someone and saying, hey, I've redesigned. I think one of the things he said was, like, you would take someone's website or something they've done, redesign it, and just say, hey, I've done this better. I've done this job. I think it's better. Do you want to hire me? You know, that can work. But I think you'll always be in a better position of strength when you control the interaction, you control the narrative. It's your world, it's your environment, and people are coming to you rather than go way around. It's always a far more powerful place to be in, I think. Rather when you're selling to people, you're always starting off in a position of weakness. It's very, very difficult to turn that around and to get into a position of strength when you're the one who's reaching out. So you need to control the narrative. You need to have full control over the situation, whatever it might be, whether it's social media, email, doesn't matter. Like, you have to be in charge.
Cool, perfect, great answer, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the little bit of my experience, John, is definitely always the same. Is like, I much prefer the authority positioning of somebody coming to me from something I've posted, or for a referral coming to me through a friend, where you're pre-approved as the person who's actually choosing rather than asking to be chosen. It's always so much better to be that person.
Absolutely. Another thing you could investigate is, Matthew is kind of doing. He's doing a podcast. He's interviewing guys like Ben Settle. I don't know what else he's doing, but that's the right approach, because when you're, just by virtue of the fact that you have a podcast, you're positioning yourself as an expert. I mean, your podcast might be complete shit, it doesn't matter. But the fact that you have something out there, like, you're automatically an expert, because, you know, the thinking that people have is like, what expert wouldn't have a podcast? It's like, even if it podcast is, I'm not saying I listen to Matthew show, is great, but, you know, you could be complete crap and have a podcast, and you're on. It's an amazing positioning tool, as is having some sort of book, something that's out there that you can point to, that says, hey, like, I've written the book on this. You know, that automatically gives you so much gravitas, authority, credibility. So yeah, there's plenty of ways to do it, but they all kind of revolve around the same thing. Like, people are coming to you rather than you kind of you doing the work to reach out to them. You're building that value. You're putting yourself out there to the world, and people are attracted to you. And it's a key difference. The dynamic is completely different, and the interactions are completely different when you position yourself like that.
When you were doing that then back in the day, was that emails, was it?
When I was, just basic emails, yeah.
And would you be making, like, because you're saying you kind of, like, were talking about random stuff, like sometimes you're talking about politics and other kinds of stuff. Will you ever just go and, like, you know, every so often, I'm just going to throw an offer out there where it's like, you know, these people know what I do, they know what I'm about, so, you know, here you go, I'm going to take on, you know, one client over the next week or whatever, just reply to this email if you want to work with me? Or was it just a case of, like, just a little kind of reminder, like, hey, just a reminder, I'm a web designer, hey, just a reminder, I'm a web designer? Not literally that, but, like, you know, they're receiving an email from you, they know what you do, you're kind of top of mind, and then it's up to them to reach out. You're not kind of saying, do this if you want to work with me.
Every email I sent, I was selling myself. I pretty much, without exception. I think I might have had a couple here and there where there wasn't a link, there wasn't some sort of CTA. So every email, no matter how bizarre what I was talking about was, or how seemingly unrelated to web design, I would always have some sort of segue into working with me. So always, I wouldn't put an email out. I mean, some people do, and I think it's definitely, I mean, it's certainly better than wanting to put an email out that just keeps you top of mind and all that kind of stuff. But I did attempt to have some sort of CTA, some sort of, sell myself in some way in every email. Yeah.
What did the kind of steps look like? Were you just like, hey, let's book a call and just chat about what you need? Or was it like some kind of like little tripwire, get your foot in the door, like, let me do an audit of your page for whatever, $30? Or were you just going straight for the big stuff then?
How did I do it back then? Yeah, I think it was just like, try and think. I think I did. Yeah, I think I had some sort of form that they would have to fill out. They would just basically, I think one of the big filters I had was that they understood the value of direct response marketing. So that was one of the, I think later on I don't think initially I did when I started doing emails. Well, I'm pretty sure, I'm going back like 6 or 7 years now, so I'm trying to think exactly how I did it. But yeah, at some stage I did have a kind of a filter I would put people through, so that I wasn't working with, I wanted to work with specific people who really appreciated direct response marketing, who just didn't want a website for the sake of one, who ticked a few boxes that would make the kind of experience of me working with them, and for them anyway, it would be more mutually beneficial if they ticked these boxes that these hoops that I put them through, basically.
I guess I was more asking.
If I may just jump in there for a moment, John.
Yeah, go for it.
One thing just of what Keith said about like sort of having some kind of a transition to a CTA. Of all the things that Ben Settle does, I think that's where he really demonstrates mastery the most. He can write about the most random old horse shit, and he'll always get back to whatever Ben's business is by within 200 words every single goddamn day. And if there's one thing he really masters, it's always transitioning back to him and back to his CTA. Yeah, and it's a segue, and it's the one thing I'm guilty of not doing nearly enough in my list. I've hardly dropped a CTA on them, and after listening to this conversation, they're getting a bloody CTA at least twice this week now.
I don't think you even need to. I think you can be very blatant. You can be talking about whatever random stuff you want to talk about and go, oh, by the way, yeah, here's what I got for sale. And you don't even have to kind of segue it in a clever way. I think you can just be like, okay, that's enough of that. Here you go. So
what you mentioned about the podcast as well, like having a podcast is great, but I think being a guest on podcasts is almost as powerful.
Sure. Yeah.
It's got great, fantastic automatic authority positioning. And I know I've made high ticket purchases, not from looking at someone's sales page, from looking at the sales page, doing a Google search, listening to the podcast they were on, and then deciding, this person sounds credible, I'll buy their shit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I just say as well, John and John, it's not the same caliber at all, but my kind of sweet spot is creatives that are just getting off the ground, who don't know their identity, who don't know who they are. So obviously with your wife, John, being the graphic designer, that's very aesthetic. But one of the things that has converted the most quickly for me out of any platform, and I'm very early days in my journey, with you talk about the audio, was Clubhouse. Because I got myself, so for instance, the second time I went onto it, and I'm not in these big name groups, I just went into one that was, you could see in the commentary that they were actually talking about Google My Business listings. So that's something that I know a little bit about. So I went in there, and these web designers knew fuck all about copy. They knew nothing about identity. And within 10 minutes, I got invited to just put my hand up to speak, to help, genuinely help. So come from a place of helping. And I got like people asking me questions left, right and centre. I'd easily got 4 or 5 sales. That was my second visit into Clubhouse. But what that helped me identify really quickly, which your wife would be able to do, is where the sweet spot of her niching is. So who is struggling the most? So for me, I can help creatives get themselves into an branding identity with their words. But then their aesthetic that goes with that, they've got nothing that goes with it. And because they've got that creative brain, it's just like, oh my God. And I really struggle to find somebody that deals with the aesthetic side of that, the graphic design of that gets that creative brain with them. So I think she's definitely got a gap there, depending on what budget level she's at. But yeah, but with the podcast thing, if she spent literally a week in Clubhouse, 3 or 4 sessions, she'd know which podcasts to then go for, because she'd see who would be her ideal kind of collaboration with people. Because obviously that's what John Caprani does best. So sorry to interrupt, but it was just more that I know people love or hate Clubhouse, but I found within a week that you get those real connections with people that are really struggling, and you could like really add that value. So I'll shut up now.
That's awesome, Nick. Thank you.
I know nothing about Clubhouse. What is it? It just seems to be kind of a place where people can just talk about stuff. Is it, I don't know. I don't know much about it.
No, it isn't.
I know nothing about it. I have it installed, and I looked into it, and all it is I see people talking about stuff.
It's audio chat rooms.
Yeah.
But it's great because it's got that instant authority positioning. If you've been handed the baton to talk, then you're immediately authoritative.
And it's great for your market research, because you know who, like I say, you get a following, because Clubhouse is only the audio platform, but then they've got to go to your Instagram account to actually connect with you. So the conversation goes, but in terms of spending 5 minutes finding out, go into a group of people that are your kind of people. So, just like for me, it's the creatives that are overwhelmed. Then, go into a few groups like that. For me, it is the web designers. They can't put themselves into words to market themselves at all. They've got no online identity in terms of they knowing who they help. So in a Clubhouse group, you hear all the problems, the actual problems they've got, which for us is just gold dust.
Yeah, I mean, this is a problem web designers have. There's very, very few web designers that get marketing. I come across them every so often. There's one guy that's very, very good at. I follow him on Facebook. He's an Indian guy, and he specifically niched down, and all he does is ClickFunnels pages. He doesn't do anything else, and he's really, really good. He comes up with some amazing stuff. But he gets marketing, he gets direct response, he gets funnels, he gets copywriting. He really understands this, and he provides a good conduit for marketers who, when they typically hire web designers, the web designer doesn't know anything about what they do. Doesn't know anything about their philosophy, and they don't really appreciate what they're trying to achieve with a sales page or any sort of web design that they might be looking to get done. So he provides kind of a good bridge for, like, he gets that kind of, he gets stuff what marketers are needing, but web designers don't as a whole. They really lack that understanding. Yeah, you're correct. So in terms of them marketing themselves, if they were to only kind of, if they were a bit kind of more au fait with the basics of marketing, I think they would do a whole lot better in terms of positioning and how they find clients. But yeah, and whole they don't know very much.
Can I jump in and ask a quick question? You'd said that if you were starting again now, you'd go for Facebook ads as opposed to Google ads. What's the thinking behind that?
Google ads is kind of, with Facebook ads, I can be very specific, as I can target people. You can't target anyone.
The targeting's better on Facebook.
Yeah, well, with Google ads, you can. It's a different means of advertising. With Google ads, it's people who are looking for something, whereas in Facebook, nobody's actually looking for anything. They're there to God knows whatever, to just mindlessly scroll through whatever happens to be on their feed. So there's a difference. People are in a different frame of minds in both environments. Which that was why I was
wondering why you'd go for Facebook over Google, because Google is when they're ready to pounce. Why would you not be in front of them then, rather than when they're on their sofa eating their Doritos?
Well, I mean, I remember with Google ads, it was, the competition was a lot harder, right? So you're competing. Okay. There was a competition aspect. I found it got prohibitively expensive. You're kind of limited to different geographic areas. And I think the main reason would be that I want to target a certain individual. I can't target certain individuals on Google ads, right? It's just going to be people looking for web design.
I've not used either. That was the only reason why I'd asked.
Yeah. So you're basically, in Google ads, if I want to work with just say purely for example's sake, I want to work with a 25-year-old startup entrepreneur who gets direct marketing. I can't do that on Google ads. So all I have in Google Ads is people who just want a website.
Oh, right.
And it might be in a certain area, it might be in a certain part of the world, which is great. That's not better. That's certainly better than nothing. But if I want to be able to tailor my message, if I was to use fake, what I want to do is be able to tailor my message toward a certain individual, and I can't do that on Google Ads. It's just going to be a generic message to just general business owners. So Facebook ads, while, I mean, the big downside is people aren't in kind of a buying frame of mind. They're there not to buy, they're there to do other stuff, just ostensibly to kind of scroll and waste time or to take your mind off something. I can target a specific type of individual that would be a better fit for me, would be better for me to work with, would allow me to charge higher fees, everything which is what I want. Now, the click-through rate might be less, but I think it works out far better, or would work out far better, because I'm getting the type of person who would be more receptive to what I have to offer. So, yeah, but the only way you'll know this sort of stuff for definite though is to test it. You really have to kind of just, put the pedal to the metal.
Right,
see what works. Like there's no right or wrong answer in this sort of stuff. You just have to kind of throw some money in and see, what works and what doesn't. I probably would test Google Ads just to rule it out as a test. But I'd be more confident that Facebook ads, given its kind of targeting capabilities, would work far, far better for what I'd be trying to do. Simply because I can target the type of individual I would like to work with, and I can write an appropriate message for that person. And targeting is to me is far more valuable than anything else. And be able to speak to that person, their individual wants, their desires, their problems. I can't do that to the same extent on Google Ads. I'm just talking to people generally, but you can really drill down on Facebook and be very specific as to who that person is. So yeah, Facebook ads I think would be better.
Thank you. Just one comment. One of the things I've written down next to your name, because this is what you said. You kind of niche down and you do an okay job. All right. I've got that on your title now.
I said this? What did I say?
You said when you said in the early days when you started, when you stumbled across Ben, you said you were kind of niche down a bit more and you did an okay job. So in my head now, you're Mr. Okay Job, all right?
I think I was being facetious.
I'm joking.
That's classic Irish self-deprecation, Nick.
Yeah.
We do it even better than the British do. Keith, before we wrap up, tell everybody where to find you.
That's a good question, because I think the best probably way is my Instagram account. It's anirishrover.com. So it's at symbol, An Irish Rover, as in the song The Irish Rover, by the Pogues and the Dubliners, but it's An beforehand, so AN, so as in indefinite article.
Stuck it in the chat there.
So my website is down at the moment. It's pearldesign.ie, but it's not live. And I was supposed to be live. It probably will be before I do talk with Ben next week, but I haven't got back up. Fortunately, I'm too busy. So hang on. Actually, I'll type it in. So Instagram is An Irish Rover, and website is Pearl Design, but it is down. So pearldesign.ie should be up next week. Or you can just drop me an email if you want to get in touch, Keith at Pearl Design. Or just add me on Facebook. It's all the same. So it's probably the best way.
Awesome. Thank you very much for coming today. Thanks for talking, Keith. Really appreciate you being here, man. It's been great.
My pleasure. It's been a lot of fun.
And I thank everyone who has attended and coming today. Really appreciate everyone being here. It's great.
Thank you, guys.
See you all soon.
Take it easy.
Got to take my little girl to camogie practice now at O'Loughlin's.
Good stuff.
Cheers, guys.